Welcome to a very special episode of the Tech on Toast podcast. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Naveed Islam, Chief Information Security Officer. Naveed, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
Welcome to your office.
Thank you.
So we're here looking over the London skyline today, and I think it's going to be another beautiful day. Tell me a little bit about you and your role in Dojo, because I think your title is very grandiose. But kind of break it down for us. Tell us what you actually do.
Sure. So thanks for having me on. As I said, I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Dojo. Ultimately, I'm responsible for protecting all of Dojo's information and digital assets from malicious actors, so to speak. We are protecting all of the information that we generate, card data, personal data, etc. So it's the whole remit of protecting the systems as well as protecting the data.
And it's very relevant, right? At the moment in the headlines, there's a lot of. I was in Marks and Spencer's in Cornwall myself on holiday the other week, and I went to pay and I couldn't pay because it was the start of their security issue. And it's becoming, I think, more and more common as data becomes more and more wide across the industry. Do you think it matters now more than ever than how we're? I mean, obviously you're here doing that for Dojo, but do you think that other businesses are taking it more seriously than they ever should be now around how we protect our data?
In short, yes. Probably not as much as security professionals would say that it should be, but the awareness has improved a lot, has come along, especially with larger organizations, especially when there's high-profile cases. And I feel for the M&Ss and co-ops of the world because I've lived through something similar in my previous life. But when these high-profile cases come out, it focuses the mind.
Yeah.
And organizations start introspectively going, what are we doing? What would we do if something similar happens? Which ultimately raises awareness. The other thing is the UK government, EU, etc., and EU lawmakers have come up with different regulations, which are either going through Parliament currently or are actually acts, which help to elevate this topic of security, privacy, and just digital resilience.
Yeah, and do you think there was an understanding, I suppose, of digital resilience prior to the last, I mean, really the last 2 years, 3 years? Do you think that people are finally starting to join on that mission?
I think definitely since COVID.
Yeah.
But what COVID did was make everything pretty much digital because we had to. We were all in lockdown across the globe. It wasn't just a phenomenon in one region. It basically was a global event, which meant we went digital very quickly. And a lot of organizations had to think on their feet how to adapt and become firstly digital and then shortly followed by that resilient around it. Resilience, a lot of it still is around making sure things are up and running. So when you hear about resilience, if you think about Marks and Spencer's argument's sake, because it's very topical, that the website is up and running. That's what's considered resilience. But over time, it's now becoming, it's not just the things like websites or systems, it's business processes in the background. They also have to be resilient. So to your point, where you said you went to do a store and the shelves are not stocked, that's a supply chain issue, right? The whole piece from start to end needs to be resilient, not just, dare I say, things like websites or very prominent systems.
100%. And there's a stat here. The cybersecurity breaches survey reported that 43% of UK businesses experienced a breach in the last 12 months. That's over 600,000 companies. It's quite shocking. What do you make in those numbers and how they represent what you're seeing actually happening on the ground?
It's about right because put it this way, there's a lot of incidents that happen on a daily basis. Just today, for example, I've just read in the BBC News that a legal aid database has been breached, which may have gone back all the way down, has information all the way back to 2010. There's certain breaches or incidents, I'll call them, which make the news and they get our attention. On a daily basis, there's a lot of lower level things which are happening. At least this email compromise, whereby someone may lose £10,000, for example. They don't get reported. But when the government does surveys like this or other organizations, Verizon do a data breach report on a yearly basis, they highlight a lot of the lower level things that are happening, which don't always make the news. So that number doesn't really surprise me.
And the smaller businesses, we presume, are being attacked less. I just said that maybe it's happening, we're just not aware of it. But the financial impact that when they are attacked is almost double, because they're a smaller turnover, smaller base. Why are micro and small businesses being hit harder when it comes to cost?
Guess it's a multitude of things. It's small, so they don't have the resources at times, right? So especially micros, where maybe one or two people running the business, and their day job is, or their whole job is to just make sure that they are running the business. They are taking the payments, they're doing whatever is needed to fulfill customer and consumer orders. They don't have the sophistication in terms of systems. They often outsource it to maybe family members, the IT providers, etc. They don't have the financial means to recover as well. So for argument's sake, we in enterprises or in large organizations, you kind of go lost £10,000. It's bad, but it's not the end of the world. For a micro, £10,000 could mean losing that money and then spending time and resources on recovering could mean they go out of business. So as such, micros are disproportionately impacted, not because their attacks are more sophisticated, it's just the cost to them of not just the attack, the recovery process. And they don't have the means to recover. So ultimately they end up in this almost whirlpool of being attacked, but now can't trust our systems. Will it happen again? And it just goes around in circles.
Self-fulfilling prophecy, yeah. And what could I suppose, and the enterprise businesses, their costs, I mean, I've got a quote here, the costs are down by 69% in that scenario. What are they doing, I suppose, that whilst obviously they have larger resources, what are they doing that the smaller guys could look at and say, do you know what? And you talked a bit about there about third parties and
Yeah.
how they're investing in IT support, but what could they do more that could help them?
The enterprises of the world just have more resources.
Yeah.
They have more money. They can partner with more reputable organizations or more experienced organizations who do this on a day-to-day basis. They have resilience plans, recovery plans, insurance, etc. Now, micros can't do that. There are some hygiene factors that I said the micros can invest in, things like strong password and multi-factor authentication, um, keeping software up to date, doing some level of awareness or having some level of awareness what social engineering looks like, and things like having the capability of being able to recover, whatever that means for an organization. Now, it's simply said than done, right? So if it's someone encrypts your system, can you recover from a backup versus if someone scammed you out of £10,000, what do you do? But having kind of 3 or 4 areas they can look at, especially as I say, I'm considering micros right now.
Yeah.
Which is there's not that much they're going to be able to invest in, but some almost like hygiene factors that they can look at, which will make them slightly harder targets than others.
I think that's the thing, is it's the awareness piece plus actually doing something, as in having, I mean, a hygiene factor is the best way to put it. And in terms of what people are being attacked by, the phishing,
Mm.
and that's not what most people think about, it's the PH phishing. It's hitting, it says here, 85% of businesses. Could you break down what a modern phishing attack would look like to a business, how they might experience it?
I will class them more. So I'll go expand that question to or answer to social engineering.
Right.
Phishing is a form of social engineering. Now, social engineering has been around since the dawn of time. Ultimately, what's happened with the digitalization, if I can get that word out, is social engineering has become very digital. So email is the most common one, which is phishing, the PH.
Yeah.
We're sending an email to be able to get the desired action. So fraudsters, as I would call them, or threat actors, whichever terminology we want to use, send phishing emails to get a certain action or certain reaction from the recipient, whether it's clicking a link to steal credentials, clicking a link to download malware, or clicking a link to install malware type thing. The other types of social engineering that is quite prevalent right now, and the National Cybersecurity Agency has mentioned this, is telephone social engineering, whereby calling things like IT help desk or contact centers and social engineering them into giving information, resetting passwords, getting account information. A lot of that, as I said, has become more prevalent in the last 10 years, definitely last 5 years because of the digitalization that I mentioned before.
Yes, it's manipulation of people, isn't it? Which is now used to be in the playground potentially,
That's right.
or a business transaction. Now it's on your WhatsApp or on your phone.
Exactly. We are so used to being on emails, WhatsApp, instant messaging, etc. That messages that come through are the norm. And fraudsters just piggyback on the back of that, and they make that communication channel the norm to try to con people out of whatever they're trying to do.
It's very, I mean, it's daily, right? It's happening at
Yes.
people every day. And I suppose that's kind of the larger phishing groups. What about other ways of how are people being targeted in other ways, sort of criminally?
I'll reference a Verizon data breach report. They do this on a yearly basis, and they do a really comprehensive job. So essentially, they flagged 3 main things currently happening. Social engineering is definitely one of them, and specific phishing, email-based phishing, or email-based phishing. Software vulnerabilities being exploited, especially stuff which is available across the internet. So your websites, for example, if they're not up to date, fraudsters will look to see if they can hack them in quotation marks. And the other one is credential theft. There's a lot of focus by fraudsters, attackers on stealing credentials to be able to do whatever they need to do. So it's not everything's through phishing. So I'll give you an example. Stealing credentials or enough information to send an email to an accounts team to change a bank account for where a payment should go. It's considered, the technical term for it is business email compromise. It's a form of social engineering. It just takes a different method to phishing. So those are the three main things that Verizon say are happening right now.
Talking about being digital and more advanced, AI now becoming part of the conversation, I think every day for us in our role, what we're doing every day, talking about it. And there's a stat here, 67% of people think they can spot an AI generated scam. You're smiling. But most of them actually can't, can they? Because the reality, it's becoming so close to reality that it's becoming hard to track, right?
The reason I smile is because the stat before, you said something about 85% of attacks are through phishing, right?
Yeah.
The reason I smiled is because people find normal phishing difficult to spot. And the reason for that is it's a talk I heard a few years ago, which talked about almost the impulsive side of your brain versus the rational side. They call it Homer versus Spock. The Homer side of our brain is what we normally act with, right? Impulsive. Emails come in, we click, yeah, read that, done that, etc. Versus
Describing me, but yes.
well, we all do it, right? As I said, versus the Spock side of things, which is if you have to make a large purchase, for example, you need to spend £10,000. You're not just going to be yes. Your brain, you take say even 5 minutes to think about it. The attackers are they're counting on the fact that people are very impulsive, especially when it's a request which doesn't mean much. Oh, I need this doing. Can you click this link? There's nothing obvious there, right? So they click with impulse. Now, that's just a traditional phishing email. And traditional giveaway signs used to be there's a sense of urgency, there's spelling mistakes, there's grammatical issues, etc. What AI is helping do is get rid of a lot of that. Now, emails have become more realistic because they sound colloquial. So it's like someone I know sending the email. Grammatically, they're correct. All of the links, etc., will look very good. There's one factor that remains the same. There's a level of urgency. What the attackers don't want you to do is sit there considering whether that email is correct or not. They will say something like, we need you to do this urgently, otherwise something bad will happen. And the AI, I don't know the right terminology, the AI-led phishing can't change that fact, which is the attackers need the recipients to act with urgency. They can't write, you have 30 days to comply, because 30 days is a long time and we'll do this later. They will say something like, if you don't do this now, you will get fined. We need you to do this in the next 10 minutes, blah, blah, blah. In a roundabout way, I smile because people can't spot them now. What AI is doing is making some of the telltale signs more difficult.
Almost humanizing it a bit more.
It is humanizing very much.
Everybody's using it, right?
Yeah.
I was in a room the other day, asked to put the hand up who's actually, everybody is.
Everyone does it. Look,
So, and it's becoming commonplace, and people are finding it hard to spot when you've written a blog by ChatGPT, let alone in a phishing scam.
As I said, the telltale sign is the urgency.
Yeah.
Urgency.
That time sensitive.
The time sensitive thing is the one thing that doesn't change, AI or no AI.
Yeah. We need your money now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a stat here about 90% of C-suite executives are claiming they can spot AI-led phishing. But do you think that potentially there's overconfidence creeping into the boardroom, potentially some of these larger, particularly when you look at M&S and some of these guys recently, and I know restaurant chains have been through it as well. Do you think there's some overconfidence creeping into the board where really there isn't a level of expertise there? It's kind of a self-taught understanding. Do you think they're potentially overlooking what could be a really big problem?
With respect, yes. For all the reasons I said previously, which is I've seen enough execs being compromised through, so just to diversify, there's phishing, which is the general thing everyone gets. And then there's a terminology called whaling, which is you go after the really big and the C-suite people. Because if you can compromise them somehow, then you can do whatever you want in the organization. Imagine if I can compromise our CFO and assume his identity somehow or his email, for example, I can then start emailing the right people to do whatever I want. And because they think it's a CFO, they are more likely to do it. And a lot of organizations in the last 10 years, and I'm aware I've worked on some of these cases, have lost money because of that, whereby CEO says, I am working on a very confidential M&A deal with an accounts payable team somewhere. Can you make this payment of, say, 50,000 to this legal team, but don't tell anyone about it? The accounts payable person says to the CEO, of course, I'm going to make it, and I've been told not to say anything about it, right? So where I'm go with this. So this is what traditionally has been happening. Now, if AI is making it more human, I can't see how the board members and execs are more confident, especially because the industry, security industry, hasn't done that much work on doing AI uh, phishing awareness training that are generated by AI, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. I was at Colucci's as a director there about 10 years ago, and we were getting emails off the founder saying, can you just send me 500 quid because I need to do a transaction at the opening we're doing, and it does take a double check. You are reading it thinking, well, Simon's asking me, I should probably do it.
Exactly.
So I think that, as you said, is becoming more digital, less easy to spot, and more humanized. So it becomes this. And the scary thing is, we're only just getting going right with AI. I think it's where do you think it can go in terms of how advanced can these guys get in terms of kind of manipulating us?
So there's different levels to it, right? So no two attackers are the same. So you've got the really sophisticated nation state led things, which are country to country type warfare. Russia, China versus the US and UK and things like that. That's very sophisticated. They operate in a manner that's basically beyond most enterprises. But again, they are going after nation-led things like critical infrastructure, etc., as opposed to consumer data, because that's not their game. Criminals, professional criminals or cyber criminals, if you want to call it, they are going after this. Now, sophistication will vary. Cybercrime's almost democratized in the last 5 years, whereby you've got really entry-level attackers coming in because they can buy things as a service. It's really interesting because the criminal world is mimicking the professional world. We have software as a service.
Are you telling me these guys have got their own SaaS fees?
No, so we have ransomware-as-a-Service as an example. I read about an attack the other day whereby a lower sophisticated attack group bought a service from a more sophisticated group and then targeted an end company. Now, to your point around how sophisticated it can get very sophisticated, organized criminals are not going to spend time and resources doing a lot of this AI, training their own LLM models, etc. They'll either try to purchase it or they will basically go after the lower end because ultimately they want to have the lowest effort for the maximum yield.
Yeah, and not a large footprint, I imagine.
Exactly. So now the scary bit gets, if I think out, is the software as a service. They may be able to buy LLMs as a service in the future, which would change the game. However, the positive part of me thinks all of the security community and the big tech organizations are building AI for good. And we'll get into this battle of, a bit like now is humans versus humans, you'll get machines versus machines, and we spot enough of it to be able to make ourselves a harder target than the next. But that's kind of, I don't want to say 10 years out, it's probably sooner than that, because we're seeing a lot of advancements in that place. But I still expect the organized criminals to not spend that much time and money because they want to basically get in, get out as soon as possible and make the most amount of money.
And without being too layman's terms, it's like a robbery.
It is a
literally
robbery.
go
That's
in, go
exactly
out.
what it is.
You know, I'm from Liverpool. I understand this stuff. So,
No, but you mentioned that. This is actually really interesting. Bank robbery, right? You don't often hear about bank robberies anymore. The last one I remember was a Hatton Garden heist.
Yeah.
And that took a lot of planning and they got caught in the end because it was physical things they left behind.
Yes.
Now, organized criminals in the last 10 years have worked out you don't need to drill through diamond shops and banks, etc., to get the money. You can get it out other ways and you leave very little footprint. But again, they want low effort, high yield. They don't want to spend 6 months taking something out because it's too long.
Yeah, because there's an impatience, isn't there, around the nature of the job, the work they're in.
Yeah, exactly.
There's an impatience to make some money and move on to the next thing.
Exactly.
I mean, we're talking about this. I mean, the defensive strategy for a business. Where do you start? And I suppose, what can you actually? We talked a little bit before about hygiene. Where do you actually start to kind of defend yourself against that? I suppose there's two different conversations. Besides that, if we talk about enterprise business,
A lot of it starts with hygiene. As I said, a lot of the attacks start off as a lower level. And what you often get is either the more motivated attackers will keep trying until they get in. But the lower level attackers essentially are that looking to get in and get out. So where they find any type of resistance, they kind of go too hard, we'll just move on. So a lot of it starts with hygiene. But then it's making sure, one of the things actually, I was at a conference a month or so ago, we talked about identity. Identity has become crucial. Just like we care a lot about our passports, our driving licenses, etc., because that can our identity to allow us to do a lot of things. Our digital identity has become very crucial. So identity has become a perimeter. So rather than having an outside the work organization and inside, if you think about a moat, a castle and a moat, we don't have that anymore because of the proliferation of digitalization, SaaS service, etc. When you log into your online bank, it's your identity that proves it's you. There is nothing else in between. So identity has become really crucial, and a lot of organizations have started looking at that. Go, how do we make that as hard as possible to be compromised?
And there's a stat here which it surprised me. I don't, I'm slightly going over old ground, but 20%, 27% of survey businesses said cybersecurity was a priority at board level. But that's a hell of a low. Considering what we just talked about the last
Yeah.
5 minutes, it's a really low number. And having been on some boardrooms in the hospitality industry, I kind of understand it, and I don't agree with it, but I understand why they're not there yet sometimes. But why do you think that it's not? Is that number's not at least 50%?
It's the optimistic side of any business, which is it won't happen to us. And just as humans, we're optimistic, right? Otherwise, we probably wiped out as a race.
Yeah.
And I noticed that in COVID, everyone basically around you may have COVID, but you can, it won't happen to me. But businesses also have that, which is, yeah, it may have happened to, and I'll name drop them, I don't mean, but M&S, it won't happen to us. So there's a level of ignorance. Secondly, some industries are just not regulated. So the financial industry is regulated, the telecoms industry is regulated. We have the national infrastructure that is very much regulated. But there are, say, retail, hospitality, not so much. So there's no driver there. Whereas the driver is obviously to any business is to be profitable, right? And often security it has a historical connotation. It's a cost, not a value add. Now, a lot of the security industry has to do a better job of showing how it adds value. But if you think about it just from just accounting perspective, it's just a cost. There's no value to be attributed.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised by that, by the way. There are some things in the pipeline, so to speak. So I know the US has become very big on it because of some high profile breaches. So the US Security Exchange Commission has made a few things mandatory, which is all public organizations have to do breach disclosure, can't hide it. On a yearly basis, they have to report on the risk and governance. And they have to show within that yearly report that someone on the board level has enough experience of doing cyber or being able to question it, and that they're managing it just like any other financial risk. Where I can see cyber go in the US, by the way, the UK, I should mention, it's got an act which is going through Parliament at the moment, cybersecurity bill, which is looking to do something like that, which is mandatory reporting, especially around some of the more high profile industries. Where I can see this going eventually is a bit like the annual accounts an organization has to do, where a financial audits come in and kind of get everything checked out. Whereby everything checks out because eventually the cyber risk will become that material. The organization will have to show some way, shape, or form that they are taking it seriously and are testing against it. And it will probably start with the financial institution because the regulators are more hot on that.
How are you guys using AI to, defensively help your customers and businesses look after themselves and stay ahead of the threats?
A lot of the AI we currently use is in the defensive posture. Have some plans around making it more into the product side of the world, but that's very much in its infancy at the moment. But from a defensive perspective, we leverage a lot of the AI capabilities from our partners, such as Google and others, to help us both detect and mitigate risk as soon as we can. So as an example, our email system has AI built in, which is trying to fight the AI-led phishing. Example.
As you said before.
Yeah, it's AI versus AI because again, we are not relying on humans being able to detect it all the time whilst we train our people. Like we need to help the people. So before it lands in someone's inbox, it's going through all of the good AI, if I call it that, versus the bad AI generated. Yeah, exactly. We do a lot of it for our for our detect and response, whereby we're using AI to detect potential malicious activity, both within a wider environment, but especially where our, I say, crown jewels are in terms of data, etc., which is ultimately our customers' data. And we use a lot of machine learning to automate things, which is we can automate actions to do it in almost in real time rather than some human look at it and deliberate over it based on years and years of machine learning, not just by us, but our partners. We can basically have confidence levels that if this is looking bad, we have enough confidence to kill that action, whatever it may be, to reduce the risk upfront rather than just alert and then someone has to go and look at it. So we rely a lot on automation, machine learning, and AI to help us be quicker in addressing threats.
And I think it's that good versus bad is it's a super interesting conversation, 'cause obviously it's gonna get bigger and bigger as we go on. I wanna move on to payments a little bit, which is what you guys obviously do. Why is payment security, or when we talk about the way people are managing payments, why has it become such a high stake business? And, how we talked a bit about cyber criminals exploiting it. Obviously, it's a profitable angle for them. But why has it become such a, I suppose, a high stakes scrap as it would be?
This is because what you just said is profitable.
Yeah.
Hard numbers, payment data as such, but specifically payment card data, 16-digit PAN number, the CVV, etc., has a value to criminals. The last time I looked at this, my data is slightly out. It was something along the lines of a 16-digit card number was worth anywhere between $15 to $30. And then if you have the CVV, which is the 3 to 4-digit authentication, it became even more valuable because that allows you to do a lot more. So ultimately, what you have is digital currency in a manner,
Yeah.
which if the fraudsters get it, just like I use my credit card all the time. And I now often don't have my physical credit card. I have either on my Google Wallet, or I'm basically putting into a website. That's just my card data and it's all legitimate. Now, if fraudsters get it or cyber criminals get it at scale, en masse, they can either use it to commit major fraud, or often they resell it. And it's almost a resale market. That's the reason they steal it, because someone out there, whether one group or multiple groups, want this card data to, again, do a lot of financial fraud. So that's what card data ultimately is, digital currency that allows us to operate nowadays. And the fraudsters have looked at how legitimately it works, and they're doing it for the bad side of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how is Dojo, I suppose, keeping its customers or keeping them compliant
Mm.
in terms of PCI? What are the main ways that you help deal with that?
We focus on the in-person economy. So what traditionally used to be called bricks and mortar first. We do remote payments, e-commerce type of things as well. In both instances, we try to build as much security into the payment offering so the customer doesn't have to do that much. So as an example, for our face-to-face payments, we build all of the security into the terminal and the communication in a manner that we take the responsibility away from the customer. So all of our payments are what's called point-to-point encrypted, which means that between the terminal and us, no one could basically hack it. It would have to come after us. So we're trying to take the consumer, and because we do focus a lot on the micro and SME space, we're trying to not place too much emphasis on them trying to secure the payments. We're giving them the secured version. We do the same thing for remote payments, whereby we offer a payments page, which is hosted and managed completely by us. So the merchant doesn't have to, or the customer doesn't have to worry about their website, because the payments are completely handled by us. So we do it in a manner that takes most of the obligations away from the merchant or customer, as I should say. But then we manage them through making sure they're following the right guidance from a PCI perspective, which is the gold standard for payments. That's often light touch for our customers because, as I said, we take most of the obligations away from them.
Well, when you talked about hygiene before, you're doing a lot of that for them, that right there, right?
We try as much as we can. Now, obviously, some of the bigger customers want more bespoke solutions, but again, we will work with them in a manner to kind of go, how do we secure this? But again, with bigger customers, as I mentioned, they have more resources, so as such, they can take more of the burden. But coming back to earlier conversation, micros, SMEs, not as much, so we take a lot of the burden away from them.
Been fascinating. Before we wrap up, I suppose, what are 3 biggest innovational trends that businesses should keep their eye on? Obviously, AI is on the horizon, which you've mentioned, but are there another 2 that you could mention?
I'll expand on the AI one. Actually, there are 3 I've got in mind. So AI, the industry is calling something agentic AI, which is AI becoming, so right now, AI and large language models are being used to do a lot of data analysis and make decisions on it. The next iteration, and we start seeing some proof of concepts around it, is allowing the systems to become autonomous and make decisions and take actions independent of the human. So when I talked about the good versus bad, if the attackers are using AI to attack, and if we have enough confidence, the systems let AI basically detect and mitigate the threat all by itself. So it almost takes some of the human aspects out of it. Now, within reason, because argument's sake, in this business, I would never want the agentic AI to do anything with our payments platform because we have to have extra precautions around that. But some of the lower level things you can do. So agentic AI is a big thing right now. Second one, I've already touched on that, is identity. There's a phrase going around in the security industry, which is identity is the new perimeter. You no longer have that I will VPN into work to do work stuff. And if I sit in my laptop at any given point, I'm doing some personal stuff, I'm doing work stuff, and a lot of it is browser-based software as a service. So identity is the thing that's proving who I am versus someone else. Before previous life, I would have to VPN into work, do some fiddly things with tokens, etc. Yeah, some of the younger listeners may not remember those days, but you had to do a lot of that to prove that you were inside the work environment, then you could do work stuff. That's all gone. So identities become the perimeter. A lot of work's being doing to be identity focused, identity first. And the last one is a bit of a stretch one, but the industry has been talking about, the tech industry has been talking about quantum and the post-quantum world. What does that look like? And there's a lot of concern, and I'll leave it at that because it is just a concern at the moment, that the quantum computing will enable a lot of the data which is encrypted at the moment to be decrypted at such a speed, because a lot of the data at the moment is encrypted in a manner that can't be decrypted or can't be hacked. Quantum will make it easier to hack. So there's a lot of attackers or criminals who are harvesting data now to decrypt later to monetize because they're waiting for the quantum world. Now, that one is a bit of a stretch. And that one's been around for 5 years, but I've seen a lot of work by Google and some of the other big tech firms around quantum computing. And there's fear, a bit like the AI piece, where there is usage for good, there will be bad actors who will jump onto that. So those are the three big trends that the security and tech industries. Yeah.
I mean, it's brilliant. I mean, it's fascinating, but also quite scary sometimes. But thank you for bringing it to us, just in a way that actually is consumable, because I think sometimes this information's hard to understand.
I realize a lot of what I say can come across as really scary. And whilst it can sound really scary, as I said, if we basically break this down into what I've mentioned already, hygiene factors, etc., a lot of cybersecurity comes down to protecting of cyber resilience, I'll call it, comes down to doing some what we call basics in the industry, but I'll call it hygiene, which is things like the strong passwords, the MFAs, keeping software up to date. Because ultimately, as I mentioned before, criminals are trying to do this with the least amount of effort for the maximum yield. And if you can make yourself a harder target by doing some of the hygiene stuff, it deters them.
Yeah, they're going to move on, right?
It's like having your front door locked or your windows locked and having a burglar alarm at the top. But the normal criminal goes, that's too hard, I'm going to go somewhere else. Ultimately, the digital world is not that dissimilar from the physical world. It's just we're living in, everything is just anonymous, so to speak. So as I said, whilst it sounds really scary, there are some practical steps we can take to make ourselves a harder target, both from different levels, from the micros to the enterprises to the personal world, to be able to make ourselves harder targets so that the attackers move on somewhere else. And eventually, if everyone does that, they will move on to some other scam, because ultimately, as I said, they didn't make money in a really, really low level manner.
That was Naveed Islam, everybody, joining us on the podcast. You can go and check out dojo.tech. And apart from that, we shall see you all next week. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.